Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So guys, first I want to thank everyone who's donated through Patreon. I want to thank everyone who's donated through Super Cash. I haven't did a live show in a few days, at least not since I've been back from vacation. I'm probably going to do one today. But I would like you to know that I appreciate all the support that you guys give. Absolutely. One of the stories that came up on The Intercept today, well, not today, it was a few days ago, but I wanted to talk about it, deals with ISIS, and specifically in relation to the term blowback. Blowback is used to denote some operational behavior that we took that had adverse consequences on us, meaning we took action A in some place around the globe or in the United States, wherever, and that particular action has adverse consequences on us down the line. The article that they intercept, or the argument that they're making, is that ISIS, in many respects, is a direct relation or direct related to us going into Iraq and destroying that country, blowing that country into 1,000 bits. It's a pretty damn good argument. And it's one that would argue is intuitive. You have a country, a sovereign nation, Iraq. Yes, it was a dictator who had that nation together, but at the end of the day, it was a sovereign nation. The United States says that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And because there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that gives us the unilateral sole discretion to go in and smash that country to bits. George Bush goes and gets some crook, Tony Blair, to jump on board with him. Being somewhat of a lapdog, did not necessarily want to stand up to the quote-unquote special relationship that Britain has with the United States. And they attack a country that did nothing to us. They attack a country that did nothing to us. Pursuant to that attack, they killed 1 million Iraqis. And beyond killing 1 million Iraqis, however, they destroyed the country itself, meaning you have all of these refugees, all of these people who are part of the military fleeing into other countries. That war that started with Iraq has expanded into 7 other nations. The United States now has special forces in 70% of the countries on the globe. That is an amazing thing. Like, it's hard to get your head around that. You're wondering why we spend $1 trillion a year on our military budget. You wonder why they misplaced $5 trillion in 2015. Here's why. Here's why. I mean, ultimately, you've started, and I know some people will go further in saying it was a direct relation, meaning the United States themselves started ISIS. I don't need to make that shooter drop for me. For me, if you're taking a behavior that is causing consequences, or that has a consequence, that the consequences is completely foreseeable, then you're responsible. Whether you're responsible just by giving money to the thing or not is kind of besides the point. You took an action that was easily foreseeable. We're going to have negative consequences throughout that region of the world, and you did it. I would make a case specifically for those consequences. We wanted to go into those countries. We wanted to knock over one country after the next. They had a plan to reshape the Middle East. And whether you're talking about a Democrat or Republican president, meaning when Obama came behind Bush, he still followed the plan, attacking one country after the next, after the next, after the next, ending with Iran. The fly in the ointment here was Syria. Syria didn't fall. Russia was backing Bashar al-Assad, preventing Syria from biting the bullet in the same way that Iraq bit the bullet. Let's take a look at this. I think they make a compelling argument. And like I said, I think the argument is somewhat intuitive. I think ISIS didn't exist. The United States destroys a country. The United States invades multiple countries, and drone strikes, murdering the population, torture, all of the stuff. A gulag off our coast. You've radicalized the population. And in radicalizing a population, it is immensely foreseeable what was going to be the result of it. You may not necessarily have conceived of the specific members of ISIS, but you damn sure understand what was going to take place in regards to that region of the world and how that region was going to smatter into 1,000 bits. And some of the bits that came out were not necessarily going to be the most savory individuals. Let's take a look at this story by The Intercept. Blowback: How ISIS was created by the United States invasion of Iraq. Your brother created ISIS, college student Ivy Zedrick told the startled Jeb Bush after a town hall meeting in Reno, Nevada in 2015. The then Republican presidential hopeful tried to defend his elder sibling, former George Bush, by blaming the rise of Islamic State on Barack Obama, because Americans pulled back from Iraq in 2011. Under that logic, you stay forever. Under that logic, you stay forever. What's more responsible for ISIS? The fact that you went in and destroyed a country in the first place, or the fact that you pulled yourself out of a country? You always have to leave. There is never going to be a situation where you're going to be somewhere for the next 1,000 years. Iraq is always going to stay in Iraq. They may change the name of Iraq and all that other good stuff, but at the end of the day, Iraq is staying in Iraq. We have no business there. We had no business there back then. We went into a country and murdered 1 million people. God damn it. If this was anybody else, if this was some African warlord, they would have dragged his ass in front of the Hague and he would have been shot or hung. Because it was an American president. A goofball, dumbass American president in coordination with the British government, Tony Blair. They let it slide. George Bush, right now, despite lying this country into a war, despite owning up to the fact that he was torturing human beings, despite all of this being grossly against our own domestic law and against international law, George Bush is out there finger painting right now. George Bush is finger painting. And Tony Blair, instead of being under prison, is on the edges of politics. Let's keep going. It sounded a bit conspiratorial, right? Calling W the creator of ISIS. The reality, however, is that Zedrick's accusation wasn't far off the mark. Had it not been for Bush's catastrophic decision to invade and occupy Iraq in 2003, in defiance of international law, the world's most feared terrorist group would not exist today. ISIS is blowback. First, the foreign military occupation tends to radicalize local populations and breed violent insurgencies. Take Hezbollah in southern Lebanon or Hamas in the Gaza Strip. In Iraq, the United States morphed from heroic liberators into brutal occupiers within a matter of weeks. In Fallujah, which will later become an ISIS stronghold, the United States troops opened fire on a crowd of peaceful protesters in April 2003, killing and wounding dozens of Iraqis. The shootings, the torture, the general chaos all helped drive thousands of Iraqis from the minority Sunni communities into the arm of radicalized groups led by brutal gangsters such as Abu Zawahiri. Zawahiri's Al-Qaeda in Iraq, formed in 2004 to fight the United States troops and local allies, was a precursor to the organizations of ISIS. Second, in May 2003, in a criminally stupid and reckless move, the United States occupying authorities disbanded the Iraqi army. That's right, the United States made more than 500,000 well-armed and trained Iraqi troops unemployed overnight. No less an authority than General Colin Powell, Bush's Secretary of State and America's former top soldier, will later describe those jobless soldiers as prime recruits for insurgencies. In recent years, many of the top commanders in ISIS have been identified as former senior officers in Saddam Hussein's army. Third, the United States military detained tens of thousands of Iraqis, many of them non-combatants, at Camp Bucca in southern Iraq, where imprisoned jihadis were able to not only radicalize new troops in plain sight, but also plan future operations and attacks. Many of us at Camp Bucca were concerned that instead of just holding detainees, we had created a pressure cooker for extremism, Compound Commander James Skylert would later remark. To be clear, ISIS is blowback from the United States invasion and occupation of Iraq. And don't just take my word for it. Listen to David Kilcullen, a former advisor to both General Petraeus and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, considered to be one of the world's leading counterinsurgency experts. We have to recognize that a lot of the problems is of our own making. There, undeniably, would be no ISIS if we had not invaded Iraq. Like I said, some of this is pretty intuitive. It's pretty straightforward. You have a country that has an infrastructure, a modern infrastructure that's somewhat secular in the way that it goes about its affairs. You go into that country, you destroy that country, you smash it to smithereens. You torture its population, you imprison its population. Many of the people being imprisoned were non-combatants, were innocent. And creating this radicalization pressure cooker. How do people behave when those people are in adverse conditions? And do people tend to be these kind of beautiful, awesome, come out glowing and smelling like roses when you put them in really shitty situations? Or do those people do what they need to do to survive and resist? And I think you know it's the latter. They survive and resist. And whatever the United States' original intentions were of going into the country, whatever the soldiers thought their intentions were, whatever our country thought our intentions were in going into that country, it's kind of besides the point. At the end of the day, we were an occupying force in somebody else's country on the pretext of a lie. And pursuant to that, torturing, murdering, killing, and imprisoning, using our troops to do so. We're leveraging the bravery of American soldiers in order to do the dirty work of essentially a Bush regime that was in office. When they're putting people in cages, when they're chopping off heads, when they're destroying monuments and everything else, understand, tie it to the real world phenomena of the fact that we ourselves made a decision to have a war of choice to destroy somebody else's country. And look at the blowback and the consequences of us making the choice to destroy somebody else's country. And I give this story because I think it's vitally important to understand the consequences of our behavior around the globe, especially when the United States doesn't seem to have learned its lesson and is continuously looking at North Korea or Iran or these other countries in which to get more involved in, even to some degree Syria. Even to some degree Syria. So I will leave it at that. Like I said, intuitive. It's straightforward to understand. I'm going to put the story at the bottom so you can read it for yourself. But I got to be honest. I think most of my audience either already knows this or already believes this. But I bring it up only for the section of my audience or the random person that may come by and see this video and may connect the real world consequences of what we're doing now in the world to what may be or what may come to pass should we pursue this agenda of attacking and destroying Iran. So I will leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, as always, Patreon. Thanks guys.